So we're given that if automobile windshields have a mean thickness of 14.6 millimeters and a standard deviation of 0.02 millimeters, we want to use the normal distribution properties in order to predict what percent of the windshields will have a thickness between each of these ranges. Well, let's start filling in some information that we were given here. So we know that the mean here is going to be 14.6. Now, one standard deviation above the mean will be 14.6 plus 0.02 or 14.62. So one standard deviation above the mean in this for windshields will be 14.62 millimeters. Two standard deviations above the mean will be 14.64, and three standard deviations will be 14.66. One standard deviation below the mean will be 14.58 millimeters. Two standard deviations below the mean will be 14.56. And three standard deviations below the mean will be 14.54. So if we're asked to estimate the percent of the population between each of these ranges, well, between 14.58 and 14.6 is going to be between one standard deviation below the mean and the mean, and so that's going to be 34%. Less than 14.58, so this is going to be the bottom part of this curve, which is going to be approximately 16%. So the other way we could have looked at this is if we wanted to know what percentage of the population was above 14.58, well, we know that between 14.58 or one standard deviation below the mean and the mean is going to be 34% of the population, and above the mean is going to be 50%. So 34 plus 50 will be 84%, will be above the value 14.58. So correspondingly, 16% of the population will be below 14.58. Now, more than 14.64, recall that 95% of the population lies between two standard deviations below the mean and two standard deviations above the mean. So what we're asking in this question is what percent of the population will be greater than two standard deviations above the mean? Well, recall that if this is going to be 95, well, then we're going to have 2.5% above two standard deviations and 2.5% below. And remember that there are even outliers beyond the three standard deviations. So the answer then is 2.5%. Okay. And so again, 95% of the population will lie within two standard deviations of the mean. That means that 2.5% will be above two standard deviations of above the mean, and 2.5% of the population will be below two standard deviations below the mean. Now, between 14.56 and 14.62, if we want to know what what percentage of the population is between those values, well, between 14.56 is two standard deviations below the mean. So this is going to be equal to 13.5% plus, and then we're going to add in 68%. So this is approximately equal to 81.5% within the range between 14.56 and 14.62 millimeters.